It's time for Tycoons of Small Biz, spotlighting the true backbone of the American economy, the true tycoons of business in America, the owners, founders, and CEOs of small businesses. The show's hosts, Austin Peterson and Landon Mance, are registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation, a broker-dealer member SIPC, and registered investment advisor. The views expressed by your hosts, Austin and Landon, are not necessarily the views of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Let's lean in as Austin and Landon connect with this week's Tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to this episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. Austin Peterson here with co-host Landon Mance, and we are excited today to have in studio with us Eric Stoffers, CEO of BioXcellerator. And, you know, Eric has one of the most interesting backgrounds I think I've ever seen in an entrepreneur. So we'll let him tell his story a little bit about, starting in restaurant management, then moving to a real estate investment trust, and now currently a stem cell therapy company. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be associated with you guys. And anytime you're associated with the word tycoon as a CEO, it's kind of cool. So thanks.
It is, and we put a lot of effort and thought into coming up with the name, and I felt that it was the right name for the show. And, the whole reason we do this show is to highlight small businesses throughout the country. Most people think about Amazon and Facebook and Microsoft, and, those are the companies that people think of as CEOs that are tycoons. But the reality is 99% of the businesses in this country are small businesses. And there are some very, very talented CEOs and other executives in these businesses, as well as owners and founders that have founded these great businesses. And so we look forward to highlighting yours today.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. Again, pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So, we're going to start off with something that's kind of close to home for me. You mentioned, some professional athletes that use your services. So there's, Chuck Liddell, Reuben Foster, and Jim McMahon is what you mentioned specifically. And we're going to ask you why those athletes use your facilities. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to give you my background on Jim McMahon. So Jim McMahon was a childhood hero for me. And then he broke my heart when he left for the NFL and said the best thing about Brigham Young University was seeing it in his rearview mirror as he pulled away. And so, he broke my heart, and then he's kind of redeemed himself and actually graduated from BYU a couple of years ago. And so they put him into the Hall of Honor and those sorts of things. So, it's kind of close to home for me, and he's here in the local area. But, let's start with that. I mean, why are so many professional athletes using your services and going to your facility?
Yeah, cool. Good question. So, it's a whole host of different reasons for the individual. The players that are at the top of their game, and I'll do a little bit of name dropping where I can, where they've allowed us to release their names. But, guys like Henry Cejudo, who's also a local guy. He's a double UFC champ, they call him because he has 2 belts. Pretty remarkable. Guys like him that are still at the top of their game are coming to us to heal from an orthopedic injury, or what they may not say or may not be allowed to say because of USADA and some other rules is that it's also a little bit of a secret weapon in the sense that it gives people a rejuvenation factor that allows them to heal quicker, feel better, faster, stronger, more energy. So the UFC fighters specifically like to come to us before their camp, pre-fight, to get through their camp. And some of them, people like Chris Cyborg, who is also I think the only woman that's had 4 belts in 4 different promotions in her lifetime. She will tell you that it's the only camps that she's been through that she didn't have a nagging injury. And these guys are all, really beat up. So for those guys that are still at the top of their game, there are different reasons. For people like Jim McMahon, it's, and he has a very well documented history of concussions. And so this is nothing that he won't tell you himself or hasn't been pretty well publicized. But we have a proprietary protocol where we inject into the spinal column. It's an intrathecal injection of mesenchymal stem cells. And our thought process is that it's going to do the same thing that it does with neurological conditions. And so while we treat people with like Jim McMahon for potentially the slowing of the progression of CTE, and I say it that way because we really don't know is the truth. CTE is one of those things that is so new and typically only diagnosed post-mortem. So the thought process is that if we can treat guys, and I'm again a little bit of name dropping where I can, but Matt Hughes, who is also a former UFC champion, who had this very well documented train accident where he was left in a condition that most people just are vegetables from. We're treating him for a neurological condition and seeing big improvements in motor function and all sorts of neurological function. So the thought process with a guy like Jim is that it'll help slow the progression of CTE. Now, CTE is probably already set in from the multiple concussions, but if it can help him either be relieved of potential symptoms that he's seeing, like maybe mood swings, or that's for him to tell you. But if it can help alleviate those now, and then maybe potentially alleviate them getting worse in the future, that's why guys like Jim come to us.
Yeah. I think that's interesting, and we try to stay in touch with all of our guests, quite honestly, but I know for sure that all want to stay in touch regardless, just because I also sit on the advisory council for the Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona. And it's just crazy to watch all the different things, whether it's traumatic brain injury or anything to do with the brain. And if there's something that you guys are bringing to the table that can help these people, it'd be great for me to understand and know more about that, and connect the right people. So
I'd love to go further on that, maybe offline here, but we also do a lot of work, and I don't think I put it in the introductory email set of questions, but we do a lot of work with vets also, because they're exposed to multiple concussion, multiple traumatic brain injury, even just from training rounds.
Right.
It's not even seeing combat. So they're, sometimes hundreds and thousands a week of small multiple concussions. So PTSD and those symptoms coincide with concussion as well. So we do a lot of philanthropic work with those guys.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, veterans is something very close to my heart as well. My brother's a veteran, and he actually had a medical release from the Marines way back in the day. And so it's really what kind of put him on the trajectory that he's been on throughout his life. He's just a year younger than me. So, we've butted heads over the years, but we're trying to figure out and have kind of in recent years figured out how to be better friends. And I've learned from him what the Marines taught him, which has been fantastic for me. And I've always had, great respect for the military, and anything that you're doing to help them is even better. So.
Yeah, in my personal life, I do a little bit more in the sense that I donate to a couple of really good organizations that help vets get back to better brain health. And even, there's some really cool organizations that are doing stuff. We're on the science side for my business, right?
Sure.
But there's another piece of it that's more holistic. And there's a lot of vets that are also seeking help through, more natural things like cannabinoids or psilocybin or even ayahuasca, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. So tell us about the organizations real quick. I mean, I know it's not in the list of questions, but we'd love to hear.
Heroic Hearts Foundation is a really good organization. They typically, and I actually went on a pretty neat retreat with them. I've sponsored several groups before, and so they invited me at one point to come down with some of these vets and actually see the experience. And so we went to Peru, and we did some ayahuasca together with a group of vets, which sounds like a bunch of dudes in the jungle getting high. It wasn't that. I mean, there's a component of it. Yeah. That definitely wasn't the purpose. It was guided by a shaman that, had been doing this for a very long time, trained by thousands of years of shaman that were doing it specifically as a coming of age ritual, or, becoming a man ritual. And then also instead of having a counselor to talk to, this is kind of the ritual that you go through. But I watched specifically 3 or 4 guys that, had some pretty intense experiences on the ayahuasca and recalling some of the traumas that they had gone through. And, there's a part of me at the beginning that felt really bad, because I was there, living a pretty sheltered life in the sense of what I was hearing from these guys. And, at the end of the day, everybody can learn something from the experience, but I learned more from their experience and watching them go through growth in a very short amount of time. So it was pretty neat. But anyways, that was a good organization to stand behind.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric.
Yep.
Can you just for those of us that don't know, what exactly is ayahuasca, and what effects does it have on you? Can you just kind of very briefly just tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, cool. Shoot, my mom's listening, so I didn't think we were going to get into this, but no. So I mean, look, guys, it's something that you don't mess around with. It was something that I went into because I had sponsored vets before, and I knew it was powerful, and I wasn't ready for it. It is a root from the Amazon, and there are different variations of this root around the globe. There's something that's kind of similar here in the West that is a cactus. It's not peyote, but it's something kind of similar. But the real ayahuasca is a root that is derived, just from a plant, but it's a root that'll grow up the side of a tree, and it's, 20 inches thick, and it looks like a python at the beginning, and then it, goes to where you can't see it anymore. But you chop this root, and you boil it essentially, and you boil it with this other leaf. But what it does is it essentially, is it the DMT? I can't remember the acronym, but it gives you a hallucinogenic type experience. So, I would say it's, mushrooms times 1,000, but in a spiritual way, not just a hallucinogenic way. Again, it's not anything that I would recommend to anybody really, unless you're doing some real work. And that's what, these shaman call it, is it's real work, and you have to be guided, and it's really nasty in the sense that it creates a really violent purge in a lot of cases. So it's not a recreational thing at all, but it does put your body into this hallucinogenic, for lack of better terms, high, that starts to uncover these things about yourself and where you want to be in life, or what you've done in the past, and you actually end up working out some of your psychological wants and needs.
Very interesting.
Closest I get to that is prickly pear ice cream from Topo on Gilbert Road in Gilbert. It creates a nice feeling for me. I mean, I go there once a week with my daughter because I love it so much. But yeah, no, I think that, it's one of those things where there are these different types of roots and so forth that are out there that can have benefits, right? And it's like you said, it's not about recreational use. It's about what it's going to do to help these guys overcome the trauma that they've lived through and different things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. So yeah, no, I think I think that there are things here on this earth that we use when we should use them in the proper way. And in this instance, I think it's the right way to use it.
I will tell you that, the shaman, so, our group was derived more of vets, and there was a couple of professional athletes in there as well. But the shaman, in having side conversations, they do a lot of business with CEOs and multimillionaires and even billionaires that are doing it for growth and for work. It's not, again, it's not about getting high.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure we could have a lengthy conversation about some of your experiences there. But speaking of experiences, Eric, you've had some really interesting things that you have built and been a part of in the past. And I know that we're all excited to hear more about what you're doing right now, but maybe spend a couple minutes and just tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial roadmap and, what you've done and built and kind of how it led you to where you are today.
Okay. Yeah, great. Happy to tell the story. And, it's kind of funny when you ask, because as I reflect on it, I was just living, I was just doing what I was doing. But it is a interesting trajectory in the sense that I'm in the medical field now. I have to preface all this by saying I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm a business guy. But yeah, so in the early years, and I'm a Phoenician, born and raised, or Zoni, depending on, whether you've been to San Diego recently and been yelled at. But so born and raised, my parents, one of them is born here. One of them was from California, but I don't know if that makes me second generation or not. But either way, went to NAU, cut my teeth in the restaurant and bar industry, started my first job as a busser. Actually, I think in one of my bios, I joke and say I've been an entrepreneur since grade school, when I was selling garbage pail kids in trading cards in the, on recess, which, by the way, I still have a stack of. I went through the garage the other day. It was pretty interesting to look back at, if you remember those. But so the restaurant bar business is really where I spent the early part of my career. Started bussing tables, moving into serving, and then bartending, and then managing, and eventually took on some more corporate roles, and then started a consulting role as well, where I was opening up more restaurants around the country. Worked with a good local chain here, PF Chang's was a big part of that organization for a while. And then, some other restaurants. But so that was certainly where I got to know people, where I got to understand, different markets and how to really just how to communicate with people, because you deal with all walks of life. I think that, and I tell my daughter this, I think at some point in your early career, you should be in the restaurant business at least for a year or something. But so after I transitioned out of the restaurant business, I had been a realtor for quite a few years, doing some private sales while I was in the restaurant business. Sometimes I would meet people through the restaurant, or mostly it was, myself, friends and family. Had a couple of fix and flips, or, a couple of rental properties on my own. So that was really the majority of my experience up until that point. And then the recession came, 2007. And, that was not just identified by me, but identified by a lot of investors, that was a good time to buy, especially here in Phoenix when our homes were 40 to 60% under value. You couldn't build them for what we were, buying several of them for. So I transitioned into putting together investment portfolios. I mean, it was started with a couple of single family home rentals, 2, 3, and then expanded to 5, and then 10, and then 15. And then I teamed up with a group here locally that was doing the same thing, just on a bigger scale. And I started working through their organization. I mean, it was kind of ours, it was more theirs, but, going from a acquisitions director to more of a corporate role. And then I also started in venture capital with the REIT, because a big component of the REIT is continuing to, have the capital coming in and buying bigger portfolios, or buying and selling. That was part of it. At that time, it was buying and holding, but, eventually end up selling. So I kind of really excelled in that piece also. So I wasn't as much doing the real estate that I had hoped. It was more of a managerial role, and then raising capital, and then turned into C-suite, and we took the company public, and everything was great. And really what happened was I was helping a friend co-list a property in Cabo San Lucas. And it wasn't my listing, really. I was helping with marketing. Really, that's what he came to me. It was a local guy here. He said, "Hey, I've got this property. It's a $25 million property in Cabo San Lucas in the East Cape. Used to be pretty famous with presidents and dignitaries, and there's a big fishing expedition there. But it needs a lot of work, and we're really kind of getting beat up by the Starwoods of the world. When we're asking them for 25 million, and they're coming back with 5 or 6 million, and and this family had it in their portfolio for 40, 50 years, and it was something they were emotionally attached to. So thinking outside of the box, we started looking into what at that time was starting to be more of a hot button, especially being in a border state like Arizona, and the term was medical tourism. So there were all these medical tourism conversations starting to happen that, that I thought, well, hey, maybe there's a group of dentists or plastic surgeons that might be able to take down this property together and do some work, and it could be a medical tourism destination. Let's start marketing to those guys. So it was really just kind of a marketing thought, thinking outside of the box. And we came across this group that was doing stem cell therapy, and they were very interested in partnering with some other people for a medical tourism destination. And, at that point, the only thing I had heard about stem cell therapy was in the, maybe early 2000s with George Bush, and how he kind of put the kibosh on really exploring the real high level research because of the embryonic stem cell and the source of it, and the controversy behind that. And that was really all I knew. Luckily for me, I got to be a part of these scientists and their due diligence in our property, but it also allowed me to do some due diligence and have some cool conversations about what is stem cell therapy. And as I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and got to be a part of some of their patients' testimonials, and this was through one of my due diligence trips to their facility. I just happened to be there with some patients that were really raving about the remarkable results. And, there was a family where the daughter was crying and hugging one of the doctors and saying, you saved my dad, you saved our family, because, we didn't think we are going to be able to talk to him again. Now I think there's some hope, and I don't even know what he was suffering from, but it was just, that scene was remarkable to me, and it kind of, it tugged on my heartstrings a little bit. And that property didn't work out for them. But over the next, I don't know, maybe 18 months or so, they were saying, hey, we kind of need a business guy to help us. Hey, what do you think about this? And, so we just had these other little meetings, and they were soliciting me to do some work for them. And eventually, over time, I became as enamored as anybody else could be. And I left the REIT and, had to give up my ownership interest in it, and joint ventured and went off and started what we call Bioscience Americas, which is DBA BioXcellerator. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, it's a cool story. What do you think, Brenda? What's your next venture? Stem cell cloning?
It's pretty tough. I wouldn't recommend it, especially if you're going to be a competitor of mine.
Yeah, I think we've learned already that Eric would squash you like a bug.
Yeah, I think so. I think for starters, Eric, tell us just what is stem cell therapy, and what exactly are you doing right now? Just break it down for us lames.
Yeah, I wish I had one of my patient advocates to answer this question. They do this every day, all day, but there's just so many different perceptions of what stem cell is. So the basics are this: we all have stem cells in our body. They're the cell that is able to continuously divide and replicate to essentially heal what it's supposed to fix. Now, it doesn't heal everything. It's not a 100% miracle, but over time, that cell, just like basically everything else in your body, slows down in its differentiation and its dividing. So it doesn't stop totally, but it just slows down. So what we are able to do with the high level and the advanced stem cell therapy is give high doses of a very specific stem cell to treat a very specific injury, whether it's orthopedic or neurological or autoimmune disease. But we are able to essentially help your body by injecting millions and millions and millions of more fresh, and I'm using kind of layman's terms to make it easy, but the most potent stem cells on the planet to help your body heal itself. And really what they do is they signal your own body to stimulate more repair within your body. Your body is still the miracle of it all. So simplistically, that's it. There are a lot of different variations between what's going on in the US and what we're able to do offshore. My clinic happens to be offshore, even though we're based here in Arizona. Our administrative office is here, our corporate office is here. But unfortunately, the highest level advanced stem cell therapy, it can only be done offshore unless you're in the collegiate, the university setting under a clinical trial, which, by the way, we do that also. But in the clinical trial setting or just research setting, which is usually with animals, not with humans.
Yeah. So I want to get into that a little bit more, but let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll talk a little bit more about offshore and why, and learn from there.
Very cool.
At Paylocity, we deliver more than our awesome product suite with crazy good reviews. We prioritize your success by covering you with a deep support system to back up our easy-to-use, innovative HR solutions. Everything we do is designed to support you in reaching your goals. Together, we tackle your day-to-day work so that you can spend more time building the culture you and your employees crave. For professionals who crave true partnership, Paylocity is the HR and payroll company that frees you from the tasks of today, so together we can spend more time focused on the promise of tomorrow. Let's go forward together.
All right, welcome back. So right before the break, you talked a little bit about offshore stem cell therapy being a little bit different than what's in the U.S. And you guys are offshore and you're in Colombia. So tell us, why Colombia, and then give us a little bit of difference between, stem cells in the U.S. and offshore.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So I think the question why Colombia is perfect to start with, because a lot of people that are researching stem cell, and the ones that are researching it and already have an understanding that really they have to go offshore for the best, not just bang for your buck, but just really the most advanced therapy. Some of their first questions are, why Colombia? And, a lot of people think that it's because of deregulation, and it's actually the opposite. So Colombia, as we were identifying targets, and, we wanted to be in the Western Hemisphere. Mexico was a huge target. Obviously, being from Arizona, it would be a stone's throw away. It would be perfect for us. People from the U.S. are typically a lot more comfortable going to Mexico than they are Colombia, which, if you look at the murder rates and the crime, that it's actually not really a good idea. But, we all, as Americans, we have the perception of Colombia, especially the city that we're in, Medellin, which most people would say Medellin, but the locals call it Medellin. But we know it because of Pablo Escobar and because of what you see on Narcos, and which was very, very true, a big part of their history. And
Sure,
you can't run away from it. But what I did find as we were identifying targets is, we're looking at some other countries in Latin America, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and then Mexico. And as we were digging into the regulatory piece and the medical system, there isn't a country, maybe outside of Cuba, that has a better medical system than Colombia. And I think part of that, as I now understand it better, I think part of it was because of their violent history. There was a point where they were a war zone essentially for decades. And so they started off having maybe some of the best surgeons in the world, which ended up going and training surgeons all around the world. And then surgeons that wanted to be trained went to Colombia. But then their medical system just grew from there. So they have, in the city of Medellin, which is about 5 million people, they have, I believe it's 5 or 6 level 1 trauma centers. And to give some context to that, there might be one of those here in Phoenix. There might be 3 in New York, city of 12 million. So it's a robust medical system. That was what really started standing out as we were looking at, it came down to Mexico, Colombia. And then the regulation with COFEPRIS in Mexico was actually much more, I don't want to use the word, but it was kind of more corrupt. It was filtering to the top pretty quickly what we were going to have to do to be an operating clinic. Yeah. And it was handout, and it had nothing to do with the legitimacy of your organization or your science or the treatment of the patients. It was, how much are you going to pay me? So that really, turned me off pretty quickly. So that made us dig into Colombia a little bit more. And the regulatory piece there is much more stringent even than the US. You cannot put a clinic like we did in the US, or you could put a clinic here with essentially having a doctor sign, a paper, submit it to the state and say, hey, I'm opening up shop. Here in the US, done, easy. This was, for us, it was 600 pages of documents. It was 6 months of vetting. It was very, very robust. But they have a very progressive outlook at stem cell. And so they have actually regulated further than the FDA. So it's not about deregulation. It was actually just better regulation. And so what the FDA has done here in the US, it's not legal or illegal. It's just not defined. It's not defined well enough for high-level science. Meaning there's a Health and Human Services Code within the FDA. It's, I believe, Part 1271, something like that. And they say that you can do minimal manipulation to the cellular-based compound. And then that refers to like bone marrow or stem cells. And they don't define the word minimal. And so for us in the business of doing advanced therapy, we don't know what that means. Put it in a centrifuge or enzymatic breakdown or culture expansion. But we know what we do is much further past minimal manipulation. So what we're able to do offshore is more than minimal manipulation. So we're able to take a single stem cell and multiply it to be hundreds and hundreds of millions so that it's more potent. Where in here in the States, we are really only allowed to take a stem cell from your body and re-inject it into a different place. So it's not growing it, it's not expanding it, it's not making sure that stem cell is viable, it's just repurposing it, so to speak. So that's a major difference.
In your opinion, why do you think it is what it is like that?
Wow. So yeah, really good question. There's a couple of levels. I mean, from where the regulatory piece started with what I mentioned previously, where George Bush kind of slowed it down because of the controversy of the embryonic stem cell. Totally get that. The way things were going, we needed to kind of pump the brakes. So I think that was a piece of it, but really, and I don't like putting this out in the universe too much because it's a fight I don't want to fight, but the U.S. medical system specifically is run not by preventative medicine, but by treating symptoms. And, big pharma is slowing this down. I mean, they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbyists to slow this down over the last couple decades or decade or so. So, I mean, really, it comes down to that piece. That, and this is not medicine. It's a combination of very high level science and then the application by medicine, by medical doctors. And honestly, there's not a lot of medical doctors in the US, and no fault of their own, but they don't know enough about it. But what I get a lot of from doctors here in the US is they say, oh yeah, stem cell is great. It's, I read a couple of journals on it, and man, it's the future of medicine. But they don't know that it's actually happening now. And I don't blame them, because, doctors, especially if you consider these guys to be the best in the world or the best in the US, they're typically not young guys right out of med school. So they've spent the last 20 years in practice, probably, just doing a great job and every day focusing on that. And then their continuing education is in their specialty. It's not stopping everything they need to do with their specialty, backing up and going to a scientific level, and then going to get a PhD. So they really just, they don't know how quickly it has advanced. So we don't have the support. It's, a 50-50 support structure with doctors. A lot of doctors say, oh yeah, it's future medicine. And then some of them say, it's snake oil. It's, it doesn't work. It's just because they've had a bad experience and they don't know what they don't know.
So what you're telling me is that lobbyists and politicians ruin everything. I mean, that's what I took from it. I don't know about you, Landon, but that's what I took from it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just,
I tried to tiptoe on that
this.
one.
I was talking with my practice coordinator before our call, and we did, just a few minutes of research on it, because I don't know anything about stem cell, the work that you're doing. But I said, if it's something that's probably outlawed, it's because the powers to be, they don't want to get involved in it, or they see it as a threat. So they're gonna do everything they can to prevent it from becoming a thing. So I think we're all on the same page here.
Well, and the other thing that I took from that is, if you don't know this, Sofia Vergara is from Medellin, Colombia. And so it's quite possible that she's 85 or 90 years old, but because of the stem cell treatment, she looks the way she does.
Right.
So, Landon, you want to go with the next question?
Yeah, definitely. So, as two guys sitting here learning a lot of this, firsthand from you, help us and our listeners to understand, what sets BioXcellerator apart from people that are doing what you're doing in other places, other countries, other clinics?
So there's a couple of things. One of them is one that I don't think any other, if I was to give you the top 5 clinics in the world, and I would put us in that same handful of people, I don't think any of them would talk about the experience that we give to our patients, the bedside manner, and the overall service aspect. So that's one of the things that I know for sure none of our competitors have. And I don't like to highlight that first, even though I'm doing it now, but really the science is the first thing that we need to talk about. And there are other clinics that have essentially our same science. Our main competitor in Panama, who is, a brilliant guy and been around for 12 years, much longer than us, which we have a relationship with. We know we have the same science. We have the same scientists. We have the same type of laboratory. We have the same basic essential treatment from the stem cell perspective. What he doesn't have, or some of the other competitors don't have, is they don't also combine that with the high level medical piece to do the more invasive applications, to be more specific, especially relating to orthopedic and neurological. So whereas they will just do stem cells and they have a great laboratory, great PhDs overseeing the science, great science, they'll just inject it to you in an IV. And a lot of times you get great results. So you can't blame them. It's easy, done, non-invasive for the patient. See you later. Have a nice day. And that's all fine and good. But I think one of the reasons that the higher level athletes have kind of turned us into their premier destination is because we take that simple IV, and yes, of course we do that also, but we also have very specific targeted injections for orthopedic issues. And we have pioneered things like the CTE treatment for those athletes. And it's athletes that don't even know if they have CTE. They figure, yeah, I probably did. I've had plenty of concussions or stingers or whatever they call them. So those are some things that set us apart in the orthopedic side. But going back to the service piece, it was really important for us at the beginning, for me specifically, to find a group of doctors that were not only had the best resume. So we have neurosurgeons that have their fellow in spine, and very specialized, very high level, highest level doctors in the world. And for us, it was also important to find those same doctors that not only understood stem cell, which drastically narrows that bucket pretty quickly, but then also had some pretty neat bedside manner. Which is something that we don't have a lot of in the US anymore. And gosh, I hope doctors are not taking this as a bashing session, because I work with doctors every day. I love doctors. I'm not a doctor. I would never put myself anywhere near their category. But the reason I'm saying this is because our patients say it every single day. When we're asking patients for testimonials, and the ones that are gracious enough to do it for us and put it on video or put it on their social media for their friends and family or whatever, it's a very, very common theme for them to say, wow, I can't believe that these doctors spent so much time with me and they really cared. I had a doctor sit there and do a physical examination, and it took 2 hours. And then they stayed with me the rest of the day to watch me walk and make sure that that they were really diagnosing me, in the way that I should be. And so that's a common theme. And we also have it with professional athletes. And I'll tell the story about Chuck Liddell, who is, a mixed martial artist. He's retired now, but maybe one of the most recognizable UFC fighters of all time. He came to our clinic, him and his wife Heidi and their kids, great family. He was doing stem cell for all sorts of orthopedic issues. As you can imagine, he's pretty beat up. But he talked about this on a podcast recently, and I'm glad he did, because I didn't really realize this, but he was down there for also some back issues, and our neurosurgeon and our spinal surgeons and orthopedic surgeons, sports doctors, they all kind of gather around, and not just because he's Chuck Liddell. We do that with all our patients. But they were looking at his images and they said, wait, you've got a problem. You need surgery. This stem cell is not going to help you at all. You need surgery for this. How is this not been caught by another doctor? And they weren't putting down any other doctors, but it was just kind of like obvious to them. And so, and Chuck said, hey, I've got access to the best doctors in the world. I'm in LA. I've been a UFC fighter forever. I don't know why. Let me get a second opinion and go back to my guy. And they did. They went back to LA, and somebody said, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't know how we missed it, but yeah, let's get you in there. Let's get your surgery right away. So we hear that kind of thing too. And I obviously use Chuck Liddell because he's recognizable, but that happens to our regular patients all the time. So it's that level of service, really, knowing intimately about my organization that I know sets us apart that nobody has. But from a scientific side, nobody here in the US can touch us.
Yeah, interesting. So I can just briefly, I just kind of want to give you some kudos for that, because my wife and I, we just had our twins about 2 months ago. But we were trying to have kids for over 5 years. So we have dealt with dozens and dozens of doctors and practices and medical staff and tests and procedures and medications and you name it. But our latest doctor, he was our high risk doctor once we got pregnant. And the first day that we walked into his office, he tells my wife, pull your phone out right now. He forces her to put his personal cell phone into her phone, right? And he says, you call me or you text me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if something feels weird, you stub your toe and you fall on your side. And I don't care what it is, but you call or text me anytime you have a thought, a question, a concern, anything. And I will tell you, his bedside manner was unlike anything that we have experienced, and it made it an actual experience going to a high risk doctor sometimes twice a week towards the end of the pregnancy. So I can affirm what you are saying. There are not a ton of medical professionals that really focus on that bedside manner, but he did, and it made a huge difference in working with him.
All the difference in the world, right? And we take it a step further than that, even in the sense that, there are other companies, and I've talked about some of our competitors that, they'll give you the shot of the high level science. And if you're just looking at it from a science perspective, it's top notch. But we also know that your mind is a very, very powerful thing. And stem cells and all of the cells in your body are affected by things like stress. And when you're traveling to a different country and you're wanting to be treated from an ailment that you've been suffering from, your body and your mind are already on a high level of that anxiety and stress. That could be a detriment to the stem cell therapy. So we have other programs that I didn't talk about, but there are other supportive therapies that we do that other clinics don't do, that help get you into a better state and a better state for your body to accept high doses of stem cells. So kind of from a competitive advantage, but to dovetail off what you're saying, it really makes a difference just on the attitude of the people around you. And our staff is exceptional at that. And not because we've really had to train them. I mean, I think my restaurant background helped in that hospitality piece, but it really wasn't me. It was just them as a nurturing, just great bunch of people. So it does help. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the science is the science, right? And Landon, you may have thought of this too, but it just reminds me of, what Landon and I do for our day jobs. The products are the products, right? When you're doing financial planning, ultimately there's going to be a product sale typically at some point, but it's really about how and when to use that product and about the plan that's utilized to get you to that point. And that's where so many people that do what we do miss the boat, is they're leading with a particular product and trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, for example, sometimes. But if you start with the plan, build the plan, that you're going to provide excellent service along the way, and then the plan leads to a product sale that's completely unbiased, it's a different kind of an experience that clients get at the end, right? And you're doing the same thing, whether it's IV or, the other ways that you guys are using it. You're listening to the client first and figuring out what's best for them, and then employing the science.
Yeah, exactly. It's if you look at it from a sales perspective, it's a really tough sell. So it's a much more of a consultative sell, and, putting together that package and having kind of people come to us. Luckily we have the high level science where people that educate themselves, they end up finding us and a handful of people. But yeah, it'd be a tough deal to try to push people into going to do experimental medical treatment in Colombia, in Medellin, that was at one point the most violent city in the world. So it's not anything you can really push people to.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a quick break for another word from our sponsor, and then we've got a few more questions for you. You okay to hang out for a bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm having a great time. Thanks.
If you're an established local company or a brand new startup, you can count on GBS to be part of your family. We're not just any benefits consulting firm, we're GBS. We have nearly 30 years of experience in group benefits, a strong sense of purpose, and it shows. GBS, believe in something better. gbsbenefits.com.
All right, welcome back. So before the break, we were just talking about, the science is the science, but, tell us more about the science. I mean, what should people really know about stem cell therapy and the immune system, for example?
Perfect. So one of the things, if you're interested in stem cell therapy, one of the things that you'll find in your initial research is that there's several different sources of the stem cell. The stem cell can come from adipose tissue, which is typically just your fat, really. So it's what you see here in the U.S. is a very light liposuction procedure. even though you call it light, it is still invasive. They're still slicing you open and putting a cannula in you and sucking fat off that was stuck to your skin. So it is painful. The other source, the other major source is from bone marrow. And as you can imagine, that doesn't feel good either. Typically, you have to do a lumbar, or not a lumbar puncture, but a puncture in your hip to pull out bone marrow. Now there's a bone marrow deficiency where it should have been. So, but those are typical sources that you see here in the U.S. And not taking anything away from either one of those sources. Once you isolate, or not even isolate, but what we do is we isolate the MSC. I'll talk about that in just a second. But the mesenchymal stem cell, the acronym is MSC. It used to stand for mesenchymal stem cell. Now it's medical signaling cell. So that's kind of changing. But nevertheless, the acronym is MSC. When you're getting it from bone marrow and adipose tissue, it's still an MSC. It's still a live, healthy, viable cell, which could be good for some issues. Typically, we don't see them being most effective with severe conditions that have progressed and are pretty bad. But if you're using those type of sources for lighter issues, maybe early onset orthopedic issues, there's some real efficacy behind it. And that's what you see here in the US. The problem with both of those extraction sources is that, number one, they're painful. There's a little bit of a recovery time. But the biggest problem is that you're taking that MSC from your human body, which is fine. But, in my case, it'd be in your early 40s. And, a lot of our patients that we see, they're guys and gals that want to be on the tennis court still and golf course still. And they're in their, retirement golden years. And, so in their 60s and 70s. And what happens to that stem cell, like I mentioned earlier, is it stops dividing as rapidly as it used to. So whereas a brand new stem cell derived from a baby, from an umbilical cord, just born today, that stem cell will double every 24 hours. And when it doubles and doubles and doubles over 30 days, that's almost 1 billion cells from that one stem cell. If you get to a guy that's in his 30s, that slows down to every 48 hours. And the difference there is now after 30 days of that 35, 36-year-old stem cell, it slows down. And now it's only doubled over 30 days to just over 30,000 cells. So you have a difference of 1 billion cells and 30,000 cells. That's a big, big difference. Now those 30,000 cells still might do something, especially if you repopulate it, inject it in your knee and you're having light knee issues. Yeah, you might have complete relief from that. And then you can imagine as you get into your 60s and 70s, those stem cells slow even more. So you're looking at a treatment that is just not that effective. So what we do is we take a mesenchymal stem cell, we isolate it, we drive it from the umbilical cord. So again, non-controversial. This is not embryonic. This is a healthy mom, healthy baby going home, living healthy lives together. The mom donates the cord to science. And the testing process, it's not like they just say, oh, hey, I'm going to make this decision in the delivery room. This is something where they sign up with us right at the beginning of their pregnancy. And we test the mother, we test the family. We have a complete history on both sides of the family. Both, mom and dad are, there's very strict exclusion criteria. So we do not allow the majority of people to even get into the program. But nevertheless, when they are at the delivery stage, we have our physician, it's our nurse that goes in, and their OBGYN can't even handle the cord. It's specifically for us. It has to be very pristinely taken care of, quarantined immediately, sealed perfectly. So anyways, the point is that that's where we would get our stem cells, our mesenchymal stem cells, from the wart and jelly piece, which is like a 2 inch by 2 inch piece. In the, we're so specific where, we could have a 2 foot long cord, and we take the wart and jelly piece, which is 2 inches by 2 inches, because we know that the MSCs in that area do a specific thing. They differentiate exactly how we want them to. They proliferate faster than any others, and they divide faster. So we will just take that, and that's where the science comes in. So we have a very highly technological scientific lab in our facility also. And what we do is we culture expand those cells. So essentially that's just helping them divide. So we purify them, then we culture expand them. I'm simplifying it. Number one, I'm not a scientist. Number one, it's, you would bore people to death if you went into the specifics, but that is the main difference. So that's where we get our stem cells.
Yeah. So the process, right? What do you think, Landon?
Yeah, interesting. Like I said, we had our twins a couple months ago, and they both had something called fetal growth restriction. So when they were born, they were really, really small. And my daughter was significantly smaller than my son. And when they were both, or after they were both born, our doctor actually, physically held up the umbilical cords, and we got to see the difference between the two of them. And my son's was twice the thickness of my daughter's, because she had severe fetal growth restriction and he just had it on a more minor level. So, but that donating the cords, to science or a cause like yours, that was never even mentioned or brought up or suggested. I mean, it was never even an option on the table. How do people even know to want to do that? I mean, how does that get presented as an option?
We have affiliations with major hospitals, and we kind of, we know the exclusion criteria already. So, folks, unfortunately, in your position would have been excluded because of the preemie aspect. But, we'll have, if people early on in their pregnancy are looking to fit some of our inclusion criteria, then they will be presented the opportunity. And what we do as a benefit to them is we offer to take those MSCs from their particular child and expand them and store them for them.
Yeah, interesting. So as we kind of press up against the end of our conversation, which has been super interesting, at least in my point of view. So tell us, how does what you're doing, is there any overlap to, the global pandemic that we're in right now? Does stem cell therapy, anything that you're doing in regards to your stem cell work, does it have any effects, for COVID-19?
Yeah, the cool thing about stem cell is, so we end up seeing a lot of our patients, obviously they're coming to us they've been living with pain for a long time. They're treating some type of issue. We also have the billionaire club and the multi-millionaire club and some actors that you would recognize, that I can't talk about, but they've been doing it for anti-aging and rejuvenation for a lot of years. At our facility and others, but definitely at our facility, we see it all the time, where it's part of their yearly regimen, even though they're healthy. And the reason for that is that mesenchymal stem cells help modulate the immune system. It upregulates or downregulates depending on what your body needs, but that the immune modulation is the first thing that MSCs do. They attack inflammation and they stimulate growth and repair, but they modulate your immune system. So we have been seeing an uptick in our inbound calls. And it's people that have kind of educated themselves or heard something about it or already knew about it and say, hey, can we do this? I either had COVID or, I want to try to boost my immune system to try to prevent it. Or maybe if I do get it, it won't be as bad of symptoms. MSCs also happen to be very, very good for the pulmonary system. So those two things in conjunction, we're seeing an uptick in people that are seeking it out. But from our perspective, from a scientific perspective, we're not going to make any grandiose claims that, yes, it's going to cure you from COVID, because of course it's not. It has nothing to do with COVID. It would be from the comorbidities, potentially. It would help upregulate your immune system. But what we are doing is we're participating in several clinical trials for, things like CTE and some of these other things I mentioned, but specifically for COVID-19, there's a comorbidity, and I think it's the leading cause of people dying from COVID, and it's ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. So we're doing a clinical trial in Colombia. We're also participating with a couple of groups, one in Argentina. Our scientific advisor at the University of Miami Dr. Correa is a MD and a PhD. They just got the same clinical trial approved through the FDA to treat for ARDS for patients with COVID who are ventilated. Very, very early on, we've seen some remarkable results, but it's such a small study. You don't want to get too excited about that. There have been some studies in China because they obviously were ahead of us in the pandemic. So there were some studies with ARDS, COVID, and stem cells. Also very remarkable results where 10 out of 10 patients came off of ventilators, people that were basically given a death sentence, came off of ventilators after having stem cell therapy. But, 10 patients is a pretty small study. So what we do know about the stem cells is it's great for the pulmonary system and it upregulates the immune system. So, the hope and the dream is that, this will help some people with either the precursor or, the people that had COVID and are potentially having fibrosis or some type of lung issue because of it, or maybe help the symptoms be a little bit less, if they do get it.
So the real question is, as a guy who likes to do Ironman races, can you guarantee that I can qualify for the national championship with stem cell therapy?
Absolutely not. No, I wish I could. Yeah, there's definitely no guarantee. It's like any other medical treatment, and it's, quite frankly, it's experimental. So there's no guarantees at all. But, it doesn't have the side effects like pharmaceuticals. So it's better than cortisone. We have a lot of athletes that's a temporary thing. It helps. It's great, but it ends up causing really severe arthritis. So
yeah, I've had a few cortisone shots in my day in different injuries, and so I can see the benefit for sure.
Ironman, that's strong. That's tough.
Half Ironman.
Oh, okay.
I'm only half of a man, so it's one of those things that kind of keeps you in shape a little bit later in life, and that's actually been one of the toughest things with everything with COVID-19 is not being able to get out and train the way that I wanted to. And my big thing actually right now, not to talk about me, but is I would love to go on American Ninja Warrior.
Oh, very cool.
And there's a gym in Gilbert where I live that helps you train for that and do all those different obstacle courses. And of course, it's closed with COVID-19 and has been for several months. So I just continue to get fatter and balder. The balder has nothing to do with COVID-19, but
we have a lot of great results with stem cell and hair too.
Oh, geez.
Not after it gets to your point. I'm sorry.
He's
sir.
Just speaking. He's just wow. So he set me up for that. He thought, I'm going to make him think like he's got a sale here. And then all of a sudden he's like, nope, you're too far gone. Oh my.
Yeah.
Well, we
I got
go ahead.
Quick closing question for you, because I know I'm thinking this, so I'm thinking that some of our listeners may be thinking this as well. So you spoke to helping, celebrities and people that have vast resources. Can you give us a price range? What does it cost to come down and to do this kind of stuff with you guys? I mean, just generally speaking.
Yeah, good. Yeah, great question. I'm glad you brought it out. I didn't think of it, but so it isn't inexpensive. You're looking at somewhere between $10,000 and $40,000. And I know that's a big gap, but we treat people with minor orthopedic issues, guys that just want to be out on the golf course or rejuvenation. And then we treat spinal cord injuries, which, we've taken paraplegics that are now, have level recoveries and control their bowels and bladder and limited mobility. And so it's some pretty remarkable stuff. They're never going to be doing Ironmans or anything, but that's when you get into the higher level protocol of somewhere around 40,000. Unfortunately, not covered by insurance. The cool thing is that it really turns out to be a pretty nice vacation because most of the treatments are fairly not invasive. So we have these programs, and if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of our patients end up doing extracurricular things like paragliding, and there's some really cool things around the city. So it's kind of, it's a little bit of a mini vacation too.
Do they do any digging for Pablo Escobar's money?
No, but they go on the Pablo tour, where you can go see the jail, and he has they have a rhinoceros. They're being overrun by rhinoceroses now in South America, or in Colombia specifically, because he brought them from Africa, and now they're just multiplying. Now it's a thing there. Now they're almost indigenous.
Wow, that's crazy. That's one thing I didn't hear about with his story. So that's interesting.
Do we have enough time to give a little present to you guys? I know typically I'm super appreciative of the time you've given here. Usually I bring like a little coffee mug or something to to remember us by, but now, and I never thought I'd be doing this, but I have masks.
Huh.
So we did donate
Absolutely.
a bunch of masks to first responders here locally. And
Thank you.
the same mask that you probably saw Chuck Liddell and Henry Cejudo and those guys wearing recently. But so when you're out there, be safe with BioXcellerator.
Yeah, no,
Shameless plug there.
No,
Sorry.
no, thank you very much. This is a very nice mask, and that comes from a guy whose wife and daughter have made over 1,000 masks over the last couple
cool.
of months. Yeah,
very cool. Good.
and not for profit. It was for donating to refugee programs and so forth. So it's been a fun project for my wife and daughter to do together, which has been awesome. But we'd be remiss if we didn't let you tell us, how we find you, right? You mentioned the YouTube channel, so mention a few things on how people can get in touch with you and learn more about BioXcellerator.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So our website is BioXcellerator. It's BIO and then a big X, accelerator.com, BioXcellerator, BioXcellerator.com. But the YouTube channel, I think, is where you'll get a really good flavor of who we are. You'll see our patients, you'll see the safety and efficacy of the treatment. You'll see the laboratory. You'll see everybody gowned up, and you can tell that it's a very high-level organization. And then you'll see some of the fun side too. You'll see our patients having a lot of fun, patients having fun together, our doctors, our nurses. So that'll be a better flavor for who we really are as an organization. So I say our YouTube channel is good. Catch us on social media, #BioXcellerator. We have a little kind of a movement that started with some of our celebrity athletes, BioX men and BioX women. So a lot of times you'll see them wearing the shirt and being strong after their stem cell.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I've learned a lot and I've enjoyed the conversation. I think that, what you guys are doing is important for a lot of people, maybe eventually for everybody, right?
Hopefully.
And we've learned some really important things here. And for me personally, just your journey and what you're doing and how you're passionate about it, that's what kind of shines through for everybody. I tell people all the time, do what you're passionate about and find a way to make money doing it, right? And it's not always possible, right? But you do the best that you can. And if you do find something that you can be passionate about, then it's going to come through in what you're doing, and it helps you build a nice business and do something good for your community. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the invite. I've had a great time. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Eric. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thanks.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, proudly hosted